That phone in your pocket, it holds the key to one of the most powerful and honestly counterintuitive ideas in all of economics. I mean, just take the iPhone. It's an absolute icon of Apple design, right? But for a lot of models, that brilliant screen you're looking at and the amazing camera inside, they're actually made by Samsung, Apple's biggest and fiercest rival. So, what gives? Why on earth would these two giants collaborate like that? Well, the answer pulls back the curtain on the fundamental logic that powers our entire global economy. And it's not about who's the best, it's about who's the most efficient. See, our intuition tells us that trade is all about what economists call absolute advantage. Just being flat out better at making something. But the real engine of global trade is a much smarter idea: comparative advantage. It's not about being the best, it's about what you give up to produce something. And that idea is called opportunity cost. It's simply the value of whatever you sacrifice to do something else. Every single decision you make, from watching this right now to a country deciding to build cars instead of computers, has an opportunity cost. This concept right here is the key that unlocks everything else. Let me break it down with a simple story. Picture a guy named Jethro. He's the best camper ever. He has an absolute advantage in everything. He's faster at setting up tents, gathering firewood, and cooking. So should he just do it all himself? No way. He's only got 24 hours in a day. The smart move is for Jethro to focus on the one task where his advantage is the greatest, let's say cooking. Meanwhile, his friends tackle the stuff they're least bad at, like gathering wood. And what's the result? The whole group gets way more done and everyone is better off. That is comparative advantage in a nutshell. Okay, so let's scale this up to countries. On the left, you see Saudi Arabia's production limits. That straight line shows what they can do. They can produce 100 barrels of oil and 0 corn, or 25 bushels of corn and 0 oil, or some mix. The graph on the right shows the same for the US, which is way better at growing corn. Now, before they trade, each country is totally stuck on its own line. They can only consume whatever they can produce themselves. Okay, now watch this. This is where it gets cool. When they specialize based on their comparative advantage, the US goes all in on corn, Saudi Arabia goes all in on oil. Look what happens to the numbers. Total world production literally jumps from a combined 80 barrels of oil and 70 bushels of corn to 100 of each. They've just created more wealth out of thin air, with the exact same resources, just by cooperating. And this, right here, is the magic of trade. Look at this graph for Saudi Arabia. Their production limit is that solid blue line, but by trading their extra oil for US corn, they can now consume at point D, a combination of goods that was literally impossible for them to make on their own. They are just undeniably better off. So this all seems pretty great, right? Specialization and trade make everyone wealthier, which leads us to a massive paradox. Why do we see so many headlines about trade wars? Why do governments go out of their way to try and stop or limit trade? Well, the answer is a policy called protectionism. It's all about building walls to trade. The main tools are pretty simple. You've got tariffs, which are just taxes on stuff you import. You've got quotas, which are hard limits on how much of something you can bring in. And then there's a whole messy category of other rules and paperwork called non-tariff barriers, all designed to make foreign goods more expensive or just a pain to get. So let's see how this plays out with a real-world example: sugar. On these two graphs, where the supply and demand lines cross, that's the price in each country if they don't trade. And you can see the price in the US is way higher, 24 cents a pound, than it is in Brazil, where it's only 12 cents. That massive price difference creates a huge incentive for trade. But what happens if the US government slaps a tariff on that cheap Brazilian sugar? Well, the writer Ambrose Bierce defined it perfectly more than 100 years ago. He said, "A tariff is a tax on imports, designed to protect the domestic producer against the greed of his consumer." And that's the absolute crucial point here. Protectionism isn't really a battle between us and them. It's actually a hidden subsidy. It forces consumers inside a country to pay higher prices, and that extra money goes right into the pockets of producers inside that same country. And this has very, very real consequences. For decades, that iconic American candy Lifesavers was made in Michigan, but in 2002, production moved to Canada. Why? A huge reason was that U.S. protectionism for its sugar industry meant the price of sugar, the main ingredient in Lifesavers, was double the world price. Just think about that for a second. To protect the jobs in one pretty small industry, U.S. policy ended up costing more than 100,000 jobs in industries that use sugar. That is more than 7 times the total number of people who even work in U.S. sugar production. It's a devastating, often hidden, cost of protectionism. So this gets us to the real heart of the issue. The whole debate over free trade isn't really about one country winning and another one losing. It's about how the costs and the benefits get spread out inside a single country. Some people, consumers and certain industries, pay the price, while other protected industries get all the benefits. And this leaves us with the fundamental political challenge of trade. The economic gains are huge, but they're spread so thinly across millions of us as slightly lower prices that we barely even notice. The losses, though, like a factory closing down, are small in the grand scheme, but they are incredibly concentrated and intensely painful for the people who lose their jobs. So the real question we're left with is, how should we, as a society, balance those widespread, almost invisible gains against that very real, very concentrated pain?